Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. Our guest this week is Melissa Snider. Melissa is a librarian from Wyoming. She calls herself a dual language librarian, which I'm going to want to talk about. And she has a focus on library advocacy and the importance of mentorship. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me.
Glad you could be here. Why don't we start with you talking a little bit about your career trajectory? How did you get to here?
Sure. Well, I started in, as many librarians might, with an interest in reading and books at a very early age, and ended up studying creative writing and having a double major with Spanish language as my undergrad. When I was out of college, I came back to Wyoming and was working in a school setting, and then at the public library, got my first library job in the youth services department. And I had a wonderful mentor, many wonderful mentors at the public library who showed me a new world of literature that I'd never experienced before because it was a relatively new and growing field of books. Children's literature was really booming at the time. And so I had the wonderful experience of getting to know some new authors and a whole new world of books. And that experience really felt right. It felt like I had found my place. I loved being in the library, and I really resonated with the ideas of, you know, working in a place where I was of service to other people. I was using my Spanish language skills a lot in our community. Um, and I just got to be around books and kids all the time, and it was so much fun. And as a child of two lifelong educators, I did tend to gravitate back toward the education field. And a friend of mine knew about a program at Simmons College, now Simmons University, that offered a school library track. So I could go and specialize in school librarianship. And I did that program from 2005 to 2007. And when I graduated, I was able to return to Wyoming and start my career as a school librarian here in our district, where I have been teaching now for 17 years. And it's been a really wonderful journey.
So Simmons, that's in Massachusetts?
It's in Boston.
Mm. Uh, why does the young lady from Wyoming decide to go to Massachusetts? Just for the experience or because of the program?
The program was a big draw. Um, I have had sort of an East-West life growing up. I was born in Colorado, grew up in upstate New York, and my family moved back to the West to Wyoming when I was going into seventh grade. And so I've been in Western Wyoming now since I was 11, most of my life.
Mm.
But I still have family in upstate New York and in Vermont, and a real deep connection to the Adirondack Mountains. Um, and so going east wasn't anything super out of my realm of experience, but it was definitely based on friends who were heading that direction, and then just the draw of an excellent program that was exactly what I was looking for at the right time.
And Boston is a lovely city.
It was a really fun place. Yep.
Yeah. Uh, what do you think library advocacy should look like at the elementary level
I
or at the
think,
local level?
yeah, any type of advocacy really just starts with connections and relationships with people. I think that anyone who is in a library setting knows that you are interacting a lot with people generally. If you're out on the desk in a public library, or if you're teaching, you're obviously seeing a lot of students and faculty all the time. And so building relationships where you really you have people's trust, you follow through on whatever requests people have. You take their concerns and their information needs seriously, whether it's a 5-year-old or a 50-year-old. You're being respectful of the people in your space and welcoming. And I think if you start there and just create a really vibrant, welcoming space that helps people find what they're looking for, that's the basis of any kind of advocacy. Because then when you go, let's say something's happening at the state or local level, and you need people to stand up and speak on your behalf, or you need to ask people to take some kind of action, um, those people will be there for you. And I've found that
Mm.
out in a very big way this last couple of years. Been really blessed with an amazing community here of folks who have known me for a long time and I've known them. And I really appreciate the fact that people are willing to take action when we need them. So I think it really starts with building relationships and having respectful, trusting relationships with people in your community.
What does advocacy look like at a larger scale, state, national, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so Wyoming is an interesting state for statewide advocacy because we are the smallest in population. Um, there are not very many certified or licensed school librarians in our state. I think we've got somewhere in the realm of 80 or 85 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've been, helping lead the school library interest group, which is a part of our Wyoming Library Association for a long time. And I think our membership is at 25 official members. And
Mm.
when I talk to people from places like Pennsylvania or New York or Texas, I mean, that number blows their mind. There aren't very many of us to speak up. So what has to happen, and I think that this happens wherever you might be, no matter your population, is that you really have to build coalitions with other groups of people. And as a school librarian, my coalitions usually are education related. We have a Wyoming Education Association in our state that really helps provide some support and advocacy for us. We have our Wyoming Library Association, which is a wonderful group. But we've also expanded into other groups and stakeholders. And because we're a small state, it is possible for people to know, they just go to their neighbor and talk to them, and they're the head of some kind of committee or group that
Mm.
maybe can stand up on our behalf. And so I think that that can be a model for a lot of places where you want to connect with other um, groups and build coalitions who have a shared goal, shared values, and a common kind of mission that we can all work on behalf of each other's needs when the time comes.
Nice. What do you think the greatest threat to libraries is in 2026?
I think it has been such a difficult few years.
Right.
I think distrust is a
Mm.
great threat. I think um, disinformation is also a great threat. And those two things go hand in hand. Um, and what I would ask everyone to do is for people to go see for themselves. Go to your public library, go to your school library, meet your librarians, meet the people working in those spaces, take advantage of all of the amazing services and resources that are available. And I think people would realize pretty quickly that some of the um, stories that they're being told are untrue. And I think that there's a lot of disinformation that's meant to stoke division and fear. And libraries, at our core, we are a space for everyone. And so I want all people to feel welcome in my space. I don't. I want to have materials that meet information needs of many kinds.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that truth is really important. And we've just seen such an attack on the idea of truth and a really massive and successful disinformation campaign that has been really harmful um, when it comes down to things like funding and staffing and attacks on intellectual freedom and censorship. Those are all issues that are stemming from, misinformation, distrust, and dishonest people who are spreading these lies. So my hope is that individuals will come and see for themselves and really seek out the true story of what it is we're doing in our spaces.
And you would hope people would do that, but the story that I always come back to is Amanda Jones, who wrote That Librarian. Uh, she lives in a place that's a little bit like where you live, where everybody knows everybody. Uh, she works at the same school that she went to, kinds of things. And yet she would have people saying just horrendous things that they have to know aren't true because they've known her all her life. And yet it can be that way in a lot of places. And I'm not
Yeah,
quite sure what drives that, but
it's so hurtful. I mean, that really, I my heart aches for her and for other people who are experiencing that type of um, anger and just hateful behavior. Um, I think that the last 6 years in particular, since pandemic times, have really been a challenge for us as a nation and for people trying to build community and live in community. And I
mm,
think that for me, one of the solutions to that sort of distrust and anger is to rebuild communities. And sometimes that's not possible, and it's not going to be Amanda's job, for instance, to reach across and try to build any bridges because she's been really harmed and threatened by people. But I hope that many of the folks who are maybe engaging in that type of behavior will have an experience that will remind them why it matters to have, why our communities matter, and that we really just hopefully can look for the best in each other instead of the
mhm,
worst.
exactly. So, what does being a dual language librarian look like?
It's really fun. So our school is a Spanish English dual immersion program. And a little bit of a backtrack to my career trajectory, it was interesting because Spanish has always been something I've studied since middle school. I just started studying it in middle school. I had a phenomenal high school teacher here in Jackson, Wyoming, of all places. And I decided I wanted to add it to my college studies. Went and studied abroad in Oaxaca, Mexico
Mm,
during my sophomore year and really loved it, had enough credits to add it as a major. So that was kind of just how I ended up keeping it, in my educational trajectory. And then there's always just been a place, a need for it. So, like I said, when I was working in the schools when I first graduated, uh, that was kind of at the very beginning of the some major growth in our second language learner population or our English learner population here in Western Wyoming. And since that time, our population of students has grown to about 30% of our entire district. And the school that I work in currently is made up demographically of half students who are speaking Spanish in their homes and half who are speaking English in their homes.
mm,
So the wonderful thing about dual language is that we are a everyone is a language learner. We're all learning language all the time, and there's no stigma attached to speaking one language or the other maybe better than, one is maybe your language of strength, or we call it the L1,
mhm.
the language that you're loved in is somehow how I've heard it referred to.
I like
But
that.
some kids come in really bilingual to begin with, and many come in monolingual, including most of our English speakers who are coming in to learn Spanish.
Mm,
And those kids are in for a little bit of a shock. And my own daughters have gone through the program. They're both in middle school now. Um, and at first, they struggle with it. It's a different and uncomfortable feeling for them to be immersed in language half of the day. So they have a team of teachers in our model. The kids will be in a Spanish language classroom for about half the day and an English language classroom for about half the day. And then I am one of the specials. So I'm on a fixed schedule. I see all of the kids every week. And I'm one of the only bilingual specialists. So I can go back and forth. And so we do a lot of um, just mix and match whichever language is best. We don't always have a target language for the instruction, but often we do. But we try to present as much information bilingually as we can, and we curate a dual language collection. So our collection of books was created when we built the school about 7 years ago. We are the first and only dual language school in the state of Wyoming. There are other programs, but they're part of traditional schools, which is
Hmm.
how we used to run. But then they built a school just for our program. And having been a librarian in both versions of that, I've really enjoyed being in the dual language program and having that be our sole focus, because then we can all really practice learning language, teaching language, and supporting students with the resources that they need to be successful, and the teachers as well, because the teachers need really specialized resources in both languages um, to support their instruction. So, as a librarian, it's been a particular challenge and something I've really had to learn more about. Um, but I was fortunate when I was doing um, my studies at Simmons to work in the King Amigos School in the Cambridge Public School District, um, that was serving a Spanish English language dual program, K-8.
Nice.
And I never thought, that would be something I would end up experiencing in Wyoming. But having had that experience, I was able to sort of build on that. And I've met some really wonderful people through this type of work, and presented about it, and tried to connect with other people who are curating collections for more than just English speakers. So yeah, it's been a joy. I love speaking in two languages, and um, it is really wonderful to be able to communicate with kids, and it's a particular honor to be able to introduce many students who are newcomers to our country and our town, to a library, because a lot of kids who are moving here may never have seen a school library for sure, and possibly have
Right.
never been in a public library either. Um, so that always gives me chills, really, when I have those kids and I'm able to walk around a space with them and offer them books in their home language to take home with them.
Do you have a percentage or a number of books in Spanish that you try to keep?
Yeah, when we built the collection, um, we were at about 43% in Spanish,
Mm.
and now we're still right around that number. And maintaining that has been something of a challenge, something I have to focus on with my collection development, because it's much easier to add more English than it is Spanish.
Right.
It's easy to get off in terms of the purchasing side of things, so I have to be pretty um, selective with my purchases and make sure that I'm dedicating funds to both languages. Spanish language materials can sometimes be more expensive than English language materials,
Mm.
harder to catalog sometimes. If I'm doing original cataloging or copy cataloging, that can be a challenge. Um, but so, those are sometimes obstacles or things that slow me down, just since as a school librarian, you're the only person doing all of those jobs versus a public library where you might have people back of house working on cataloging while other people are out
Right.
interacting with the public. I'm doing it all, and it's hard to find a solid block of time to work on those types of projects. But um, yeah, we've been able to pretty much maintain our levels, our percentages. Um, we do try to focus on finding they, it's referred to as authentic Spanish literature. So books that are written originally in Spanish and not translated from English to
Right.
Spanish. And I've found some really special vendors around the country who can provide those types of books. Um, and so, looking for vendors and finding places to purchase materials has also been something that I have to spend time doing and do research about.
Do you have any other languages in your school besides Spanish and English?
Not many. We have a few students who speak Russian. We have some students who speak German, actually.
Hmm.
And that's about it for our linguistic diversity. When I was in Cambridge, I think there were 60 something languages in their English language program. It was wild. So I always do hold that in mind when people are talking about the challenges of, oh, got to find it in the second language. And I think, well, there are a lot of other languages that are harder to locate and harder to serve. And having presented about the topic, I've met a lot of librarians who are serving communities where they have um, they have second language learners coming from all over the world and
Right.
needing a greater variety of resources. So all the
Once upon a
respect to those
time,
folks.
once upon a time, I was in charge of libraries for Fresno Unified in California, and we're one of those kind of places that, oh, we now need books in X, and a few
Right.
years ago it was in Arabic,
Hmm.
but it actually isn't that difficult. The challenge for us is always we have a large Hmong population
Hmm.
here, uh, but it's mostly just us, uh, Minnesota, and Wisconsin.
Yes.
And so there aren't a it's hard to buy books.
Yeah.
Spanish you can buy, although I agree with you about, wanting to get authentic materials. That's definitely more of a challenge.
Yeah, and then, I mean, you're getting into kids' materials, and then if it's coming from different, Latin American countries, for instance, then the language can be really different, like, the
Right.
meanings of certain words can vary place to place. So, sometimes it's even hard for kids to comprehend a book if it's coming from Spain Spanish
Mm,
versus Mexico Spanish, which is where a lot of my students are coming from with their linguistic background. It's really fascinating, and, another issue we run into is home literacy levels, and that's in English
mm,
and Spanish, whether our students are,
right.
coming from a highly literate home or a less literate home, and, trying to meet the needs of kids who might be coming in with less, traditional schooling, and, so you're not always it's not like, "Oh, we purchased the books and they're on the shelf and now everybody can access them." That's not always the case, so as we know, it's always kind of you start with you're prepared and then you start moving things, um, differentiating for the students as you need to. You can
Mm.
see my dog is opening the door.
I saw.
She went, "Hello."
Talk a little bit about mentorship. You mentioned that how important that is to you.
Yeah, I never wanna forget. I always want to remember that I have had the great fortune of really being apprenticing with so many amazing librarians and library teachers, and I'll just shout out a couple of names. One person was Debbie Schlinger at the Teton County Public Library, Kay Farmer, Patty Rocha, just a great group of people who really got me excited and interested in the field. And then once I was in Boston, I worked with a woman named Sarah Novogradsky, who is still working in the school districts there. She is just a phenomenal human and an amazing teacher, amazing librarian, and I learned so much from her. And it was at like a tough point in my life too. I was kind of mid-20s, not knowing exactly what was coming next and doing my best to follow what I thought was the right path. And I just remember not only were these people giving me, professional advice, but they were also just helping personally guide me through tough decisions and next steps and heartbreak and all of the things that happen along the way. And I just really appreciate so much of what I learned from everyone. Um, and, coming back to the school district, I've been really fortunate to work with some incredible mentor teachers here. And now I'm sort of at the point in my career, I guess we could say mid-career. I don't really know, never know, I guess, where you look around and suddenly you're the most experienced one in the room. And
Right.
that's a little bit of a shock sometimes. I have another colleague who's been in the district as long as I have, and we've both been in libraries for about the same amount of time. So we rely on each other a lot.
Mm.
And then we do our very best to sort of help mentor the next folks. And I think, just experiences I've had across our state, working with my state association. Again, just super grateful for people I'm learning from the public library side of things, people I just really admire who are doing incredible work in public libraries, advocacy work, um, programming, and collection. And it's just really inspiring. And I think that's one thing that I love about being a librarian is you never stop learning. It's always a field where there's something new happening, some new program you can put together, some new piece of literature that lands on your desk that you think, oh, I can design like a whole, lesson or unit of study around this.
Mm.
And um, I just love that. I love that excitement. But I think a lot of what keeps me moving forward and gives me hope is working with people who are so excellent at what they do and so dedicated to what they do. And my goal is to be of assistance to other people now if I can be, as well as to keep reaching for other folks when I'm needing support. So I just think, we can learn from one another, and then there does come a time where we start to give back maybe more in different ways. And I want to encourage people to find those places and step into those leadership roles when you can. Say yes to something if you're asked to be on a committee or provide some kind of volunteer effort. It's not always the right time, but it's great to consider those opportunities and to take them when they come up.
So this is one of the questions that I ask everybody. And is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
I remember in my elementary school library, which I was fortunate to have in Oswego, New York at Layton Elementary, I had a librarian, and I read every Nancy Drew book that belonged in the library, and there was a whole shelf of them. It was sort of like the Dog Man of its time, you know?
Right.
It took up an entire shelf or two, and I remember I read through every single book. And when I finished Nancy Drew, I turned and looked at her and I said, "What am I gonna read next?" And she browsed through the shelves with me, and I remember her pulling a book off the shelf and handing it to me, and it was A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline
Mm.
L'Engle. And I took that book home and it blew my mind. I just loved it. I loved Meg. I loved her brother. I loved their journey. Um, that book was a portal, into more literary types of books from my series reading days and building those skills as a reader to being able to just really travel through time and space.
Mm.
Um, Another book that I absolutely loved as a child was Harriet the Spy. I Louise Fitzhugh. It was one of my absolute favorites. I read it until it was falling apart. I still have my original copy, and it's pretty battered, but I keep it because I loved it so much, and it was
Mm.
one of those books that I would take to bed with me and fall asleep holding. So those are a couple of my childhood favorites.
What are you reading now?
Right now, I'm always kind of reading too many things at once. I
Yeah.
need to really try to start focusing. This is probably not something I'm going to do, but I like to say that I will. But my books of uh, at the moment are Coach by Jason Reynolds, so the newest in the
Oh.
track series. I'm excited about this one because I do love the track series and all of the characters, and I just love the humor and the humanity in his books. They're always funny in like the most surprising ways, and the characters are so um, real and flawed and fun to read about. So I'm loving that. And I also have, new to our school library collection, On the Block, Stories of Home. It's edited by Ellen O, who's phenomenal. And it's, published by We Need Diverse Books. And that's just a group, a company that I have really appreciated.
Mm.
Um, as somebody who's trying to curate a collection that has, for a group of learners who have diverse backgrounds, I really am looking for wonderful books to hand them and books they can connect with. And because of the work of LNO and the other folks at We Need Diverse Books, they've really opened a lot of doors in the publishing world for people and gotten a lot of great books on our shelves. So I love short stories, so I'm reading through that collection.
Melissa, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today. For our listeners and watchers, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And again, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.